Welcome to Human Potential at Work, the show where we explore social impact, inclusion, and empowerment of everyone, including persons with disabilities. Your host is Deborah Rue, CEO of Rue Global Impact, and co-founder and chairwoman of Billion Strong, an identity and empowerment organization designed to bring billions of voices of persons with disabilities together. To join the global community and to donate to the cause, visit billion-strong.org. That's billion-strong.org. And now, on to the episode.
Hello, everyone. My name is Deborah Rue, and this is Human Potential at Work. I really enjoy these episodes because we get to really explore the nuances of global issues and how do we solve them. And the woman that's on today we have been friends for many years. And I was friends with her wonderful, amazing husband, Keith Hogan, who has transitioned and passed over for years, and what a loss. He was such an amazing gift to the world. But so she's going to talk a little bit about Keith and how he inspired the work that she's doing. But I believe that Ruth is making very serious contributions to the world. I've always felt that. And I know she's been very engaged helping disenfranchised people, including working with Indigenous people. And I'm very proud that I have a slice of Cherokee Indian in my family, as my grandmother was full-blooded Cherokee. I'm very proud to have Indigenous blood in my family. But so Ruth, welcome to the program. Welcome to the program. I know you founded Future Story Lab and a lot of other things. So would you mind just giving the audience an introduction of who?
And thank you very much. You and I have had these wonderful conversations over the years, and I look at everything as we come together at the point when it's time to create a wisdom exchange. And that's what I feel like we're doing today, because that's where you really build wealth. And wealth is so much more than money. You know, money is nice. It's the coin you have to put in the machine, but it's all the other things, the community capital, the relationship, the trust, and all those pieces. And it's also a way to create a shared language of future, because we see what each other does and we can play off of it and still stay mapped to our particular mission. But we need all these different threads in the weave and actually to create that fabric of future that right now has a lot of holes and tears in it.
Yeah.
It's been stretched. And I always was a compassionate and empathetic person, but that went to this exponential level. I might start crying after I met my late husband, Keith Hogan. He was extraordinary, as you know. He was born with a form of muscular dystrophy called spinal muscular atrophy. And as such, he never walked. So it's an ongoing neuromuscular disease where your strength, your muscles just never develop. But he didn't let that stop him. He was very ambitious, and he was my really close day in, day out example of how amazing people with disabilities are, because they're finding a way in a world that was not made by, with, or for them.
Right.
So if you want to find innovation, look at the people who weren't supposed to be at the table and are still finding a way to eat. Those are the people we need to focus on. So,
Agree.
Technology completely changed his ability to engage with the world. He got to bring forward more of who he was. He wasn't just the guy in the wheelchair. In fact, most people don't even remember him as the guy in the wheelchair. They remember him as super smart, creative, bright blue eyes, and a laugh that could change the world. Yes. And it did. So and through him, as I said, I already had the seeds of this in myself, but it was just day in, day out, and I saw the way he navigated the world, and it made me aware. Like, my level of awareness went to this an exponential level when I realized not only how he was made invisible, but also how he was also marginalized and diminished, because people would treat him as if he was less than.
Right.
And so technology became the way where he could extend who he was in a way that he couldn't physically do. And that's why I've always seen it as this powerful tool. And our first technology is language. So for me as a writer, it's like, how can I bring you into the story? How can I create these right-sized containers for potential called language? So that because if you can't ask the question, you can't get the answer. And what we're looking at here is, how can we ask better questions? So even in the short time, the 11 years since he passed, 10 years that he passed away, 11 years, wow, that since he passed away, the technology of opportunity has changed massively.
Yes.
Not only from a way for where he would be able to express himself, but also in the way that with the advancement for spinal muscular atrophy and the medicines that have come forward, children that are babies that are born now, if they can get this one shot in the first year of their life, they are going to have a completely long-lived, physically engaged life. So it's just, so I sit there and wonder about that. And so for me, part of the big story of inclusion is not just from any kind of capacity diminishment. It is, are you getting access to the tools you need to be all of who you are? Because clearly we need more people at the table.
And I also agree that Keith was such an amazing man. And you would have really stupid comments from people asking you telling you what a hero you were because you married Keith. Which I don't know how Keith is supposed to handle that message, because it continues to say you're less than, you're invisible, you're not worthy, you don't matter. And Keith just wouldn't hear of that. And so I just, and the CEO of Billion Strong, Dr. Lamondre Pugh, he has the same muscular.
I saw that.
Yeah.
It's really this, and I posted about this the other day, is that when people would say to Keith, oh, I had this dream last night and we were throwing a football around and you weren't in your wheelchair. And he was like, that doesn't make me happy. What that means is that you don't see me as I am as a whole person.
You're broken.
At the lack. When people would say to me, you're such a angel, you're such a hero, you're so whatever for marrying Keith, and I would look them square in the eye and I'd say, for marrying a man in a wheelchair, it's like I would look them in the eye and say, how do you know you didn't? And they would get real quiet and go, oh, so, because I'm like, something extraordinary can happen in your life because we're fragile as humans. So what are you going to do? When Keith was in the hospital, the nurses would say every day I would come in and they'd be like, oh, you came back. And I'm like, how is this a thing? He didn't see himself as disabled. Differently abled is a much better and healthier description. But because he had talents that others didn't have, just like any other human being.
That's right. Because society disables us by building technology that is not accessible, by building apps that aren't accessible, by building stairs when it's not necessary to have stairs, which benefit when you create innovative ways to get into your buildings. Everyone benefits from that, including Keith.
Yeah, and that it's just like the things that your awareness, once your awareness is raised, and I think that's a huge part of this, is that. So here in Austin, they have this development called Mueller, and I walk around there all the time. But the thing I noticed is every single porch has stairs leading up to it.
Right.
There's no because the aesthetic, the architect's like, I like the way it looks like brownstones. And these are not cheap. These are $500,000. And so I said to one of the developers of it, that I know otherwise. And I said, what do you do for people who are aging or disabled? He goes, oh, they can go in their back door. I was like, honey, if I'm spending $500,000, I'm walking in the front door, as are my friends.
Go to the back. Yeah, go to the back.
And so
you
but it
belong.
was just, so I look at that and I think about all of the ways we have to create accessibility. Technology is designed to create efficiency and efficacy. It's supposed to create a way for us to do our work better. And it's a means, not an end. And that's part of the problem. It's like, I read a book years ago called The Invisible Computer. And it was all about the fact that technology's learning curve is this rocket ship going up. Human learning curve on a good day is this.
Right.
And so what we have to do is, rather than having that gap grow, we have to move technology under here so it supports the human experience.
Yes.
And I read that back in 1998, and it was very influential on me. And it led to the concept of slow tech, which is sustainable local organic work plus technology. It's putting technology back where it belongs to support the human experience, not distract from it.
Wow, they really
Yeah.
important. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, insert the big duh here. Yeah. So being with Keith is a gift that keeps on giving, even though he's been gone quite a long time. The connections I've made, yourself included, have completely expanded my worldview. And as with what you're doing with the 1 billion strong, as we were talking a little bit prior at the beginning of the show, for me, I'm always like, how do we bring it back down to the household level?
Mhm.
How do we make sure that people are not being left behind because they can't go into the high tech mainstream because they can't? But that's a potential. But as we saw with COVID last year, you have to be prepared for literally the whole world to stop. What happens to people? And so when I say bring it to the household level, it's saying, like with Keith, he was a builder and couldn't use his arms. He was a writer and couldn't use his hands. So the technology filled in the blank for that, but it gave him an ability to move his big dreams out into the bigger world. And so I think it's a lot for people to think about the word billion, but that's, or even understanding the complexity of what disability means.
Right.
And one of the phrases we used to use is don't diss my ability.
Right.
It's just as a concept, you have to build empathy, you have to build awareness, you have to find a way to be of service to a potential future that you can't see, but we can experience by engaging with other people, which is why we need a diversity in the workplace, which is why we need more inclusion. Because if we're not doing it for who has been labeled the least among us, then it shouldn't happen.
I agree. And also now society's starting to listen. We have, if you just look at the Valuable 500, we have 500 major multinational corporations that have committed to including us. But where they are now is, now we got to do, how do we do this? How do we really do it? Because what we don't want to do is do what we've already done before, because it doesn't work. There's not enough people really included. And that's one reason why we created Billion Strong, was because if they cannot find our community. I know that the CEO of Wells Fargo famously said during the pandemic that the reason why they were not promoting Black and brown talent was because they couldn't find it, which is ridiculous.
Yeah, they're not looking very hard.
Ridiculous. Wow. And he got, oh my gosh, yeah, social media got him real bad. But the reality is, unfortunately, that is true for us. Of course, we want to find the Keith Hogans, we want to find the Dr. Lamondre Pughs, but there are so many more people that are part of this community, but people do not proudly identify because we've made it not okay to be a person with a disability. You're broken, you're invisible.
You're not productive, you're not useful to the machine.
Or innovative or creative, or which is lies.
And it's also a lack of exposure, because I remember my dad, when he first met Keith. So my dad was in London during the bombings during World War II. And his experience of people with disabilities was war veterans.
Okay.
There was a great tragedy connected to it, and that it wasn't there, it just wasn't exposed to it. But over the years, he was a doctor, so he saw a lot of people in the medical world. But I didn't know how he was going to react when he first met Keith, because you go back to your childhood story of, oh, this is whatever. And he couldn't have been more excited to meet him. And it was just a wonderful relationship. And so that's what we have to do, is we have to normalize differences.
I agree.
You know,
Ruth, I want to tweak the direction just a little bit, and I want to talk about your business, Future Story Lab, because I really want the audience to know what you're working on and how they can engage with the work that you're doing, because it really is powerful. And I've been watching your work over the years, and because I believe both of us are futurists. So sometimes you're like, oh, we're going to do this. And then you start doing it and you're like, oh, okay, now we got to tweak over here. And it's just part of it. And I want to make sure the audience knows what you're doing with Future Story Lab. And once again, with the hope of how people can participate in what you're.
It was really interesting. It came to me last year because obviously I'm a writer, and I'm a great fan of language as a way to shift the storyline, literally and figuratively. And so I started thinking about Future Story Lab, and what it is a collection of sense-making tools. because we're in a moment where we have so much noise, but how do you find the signal? How do you actually discern that? And do it in a way that it moves out of the abstract, it moves out of this intellectual ivory tower story, and saying, what do real people care about? What they care about having a place to live. They care about their family. They care about being valued in the world. They care about their heart and their health and all of the things. But how do you have access to that? And living in Austin has certainly influenced me because I've been here on and off since 1980. And what we have now is this huge opportunity gap. We have plenty of high tech, but that displaces a ton of people who don't have the skill set, but they also don't have the interest in turning into a high tech person, because that's where slow tech comes in, which is like, how can we support what you're already doing? And this is, of course, I'm very cognizant of this because of having worked with indigenous tribes and being with Keith and being in the what are called the fringe communities, but are actually as you can tell, with 1 billion strong. It's not fringe, it is the rug. Okay, so let's get clear about that. So to start thinking about how at the household level, creating what we're calling kitchen table capitalists, the ones who sit at the table and look at what they have and say, what can I do with what I have? And so that it's not just about getting people into houses, it's keeping them there. It's not just about changing everything, it's having a plan for day 2 for sustain, because we have this whole, it's easy to seed, root, and grow. Sustaining is what is really hard for people, because you have to be firm in your framework and flexible to receive new information. And we have been acculturated out of it, so we have to get back to basics on it. So how this transpires is I'm working with my friend Kent's company 214 Alpha, which creates a virtual marketplace for products and services. So that we're doing our first pilot kind of learning lab here in our own neighborhood, where people who want to work at home for childcare reasons, or they just don't want to go into an office, or they have the capacity to do that, but they need the tools to do it. They have the why, they need the how. And so what Future Story Lab does is help develop that coin to put into the machine, that how and that why as two sides of it. Not only are we working on the learning lab here, it's also working with corporations and with small towns and communities that are saying, how do we keep people here? And how do we draw back the people we had to send away because there was no future? So it's turning it with me like you have an idea and all of a sudden you realize, oh, this is a global changing opportunity. And it's one of my big passions is also women's work. Mm-hmm. It is according to a New York Times article in 2018, it was a $10.9 trillion global market that's laying unaddressed. So I was talking to a friend saying, if you were really a good capitalist, you wouldn't be leaving $10.9 trillion on the table. I'm just saying. That's a big gap. So it's looking at women's work, and this is the traditionally conducted by women, but it's non-gendered in my experience. It's anybody who is doing undervalued, invisible, essential work, and they are not being compensated for that, even though what they are doing is essential to the actual production of other parts of the economy. So here we are, that if we say all of the people, which is over 90% of the population, who is considered in this, again, the fringe that should be the carpet, let's weave all that together. And that's what Future Story Lab does, is to take those disparate pieces and actually put them on the path to community wealth, to give them the tools, to help them to create a narrative of future, to organize into stakeholder alliances, to find those pieces that you're really good at, and then find the people who can do the other pieces.
And will you ground it with an example? Because I hear what you're saying, but I think an example might be helpful.
The learning lab that we're creating here, it's 6 households. Each one of them has different desires about how they want to work at home. One is a graphic designer, one is a researcher, one is a baker, and another one is a connoisseur who now wants to create boxes of tea for people. Okay. And then we have other ones that come in, but those are like the core 4 right now. And what we're doing is actually building the collective around them, saying, okay, you're the cornerstones of this collective. And then they are listing what else they need. So we're out seeking other producers and other buyers to actually build a microeconomy right in the neighborhood. So they are actually able to conduct their business within the collective, so they're not paying all the fees to Amazon and to these other places. So what we're doing is finding a way to build an economy based on production, not just consumption.
Okay.
Because the consumer economy, it's valuable, but I'm in the process of writing one of my many articles in the wings, is so if we have economy that has consumed producers, and now we're consuming consumers, what's left? We can't continue this consumer cycle. We actually have to create productive
the consumers.
opportunities.
It's hurting our earth and everybody.
Well, it is. It's hurting your earth, and it's also, and of course, I look at this through the lens of women's work. I would say 90% of the women I know that have children are having to, their work just amped up 100% over the last year, and we hear about how the people who are in the CXO offices are handling it. That doesn't really matter to somebody who's going, I've got to find $1,500 a month for childcare, and I have to do those things. So if they can actually find a way to create an exchange with their neighbors, they're solving each other's problems. So it's also a tool for governance.
Okay, which I love. Yeah. But give some example about how these four houses would work together. I mean, you give me a couple, but
right. So one of them, the baker, and
I would like baker as a neighbor.
Exactly. Because food is the basis of everything. Let's be real. Okay. So the baker wants to bake 20 loaves of bread a week.
Okay.
And so what he does is he puts it on this marketplace and says, I can do this, and I can custom. If you prefer rye bread versus sourdough, or it gets to the holidays if you want more holiday breads. So he's able to do that in his own home. And because of the Texas cottage food laws, it falls within the realm of what's allowed to cook in your own home.
Okay.
And then you create an exchange. So this way, these people who may have been, they want fresh bread. Let's say Deborah wants some fresh bread. She'd like to be able to call him up and go, hey, or just do it on the app and say, hey, this is what I'm looking for. Or there's another person who grows plants. She's just like this amazing green thumb. So it's a way to not only build relationship between your neighbors, because like we here in Austin, we had the snowpocalypse in February. That doesn't happen in Texas, okay? And the Texas grid went down. I myself had no heat or anything for 40 hours. It was just, and these houses are not built for it, okay?
No.
But it was this kind of spot mutual aid that everybody created that changed the way they engage with their neighbors for the rest of the year. You know, they had this crisis and there was a solution. There was no help coming from any top-down organization.
You got to help each other.
So this is, let's not wait for a crisis. Let's just go ahead and build these relationships so that when Deborah wants fresh bread, all she has to do is go to him and go, hey, I need 3 loaves, or send to friends or whatever.
And this to me is like bringing back the neighborhood farm. What do you call it? When you go into the farms, the farmers.
The CSA. Yeah.
Thank you. I just can't. My brain is so exhausted these days. But to me, it is go local. And I just want to give a little silly story. I live in rural Virginia, and I am in the country. I'm surrounded by land. It's amazing. But I also do have neighbors, but I don't have neighbors cookie cutter. They're not right on top of me. So I have 2 new neighbors, and the woman, it's pandemic, but still one of my neighbors that moved in, she invited some of the women over for tea. And I thought, oh, how fun. I get to leave my home for something. And then when we were there, and she's just lovely. I'm so excited to have this woman as my neighbor, but she said, by the way, I have a gigantic pantry here and it is stocked. And I said, I also have a pantry that I have stocked. And then one of the other neighbors said, I have a freezer full of meat. And I thought, freezer's great, except I would be worried about that electricity thing. It's like having all this canned goods, but I don't have a can opener. But the thing that I really appreciated about my new neighbor is that she's thinking like I am. How do we make sure we're safe? Because we see the supply chains breaking down. We see the inflation. We know it's troubled times.
Mhm.
But I think that there's nothing more important than us to come back locally and support each other. And I think that's something Americans have learned. And we can look at other countries and say, oh, they didn't do what we did, and that we're all going to go into these little tiny bubbles, 1 and 2 people. And no, generations are coming back together, which is more important than ever before to do what you're doing with Future Story Lab, because in my home, I've had multiple generations, and we do right now because my daughter has moved back home, and sadly, my husband is walking a really sad path with dimensional epilepsy now, but it's so important. At the same time, of course, Billion Strong, when I was creating it, I had Americans say, just create it here in the States. And I was saying others, don't do it in the States. You're so complicated, which we are. But it's no, this must be done at a global level. Everybody has to be included. So I'm trying to do it there, and you're trying to do it right in our homes. Because when we age into disabilities, we don't know what to do to help our family members we love. It's a huge, gigantic issue that's happening all over the world.
And that's exactly it. As I was listening to the news this morning, and they're talking about the supply chain, and I'm like, you keep trying to solve it on this meta macro level. That it took those billions of dollars and said, let's feed the roots. Let's support what people are doing. Because I often say, I've never seen a tree grow from the top down. That is not how it works. Good one.
Yeah.
And we have to really think about this. When we talk about 7 generations, it is 3 below and 3 above. We're the 0 part of it. It's not 7 up, and which is not sustainable. So when we look at this stuff, and when I said it's like seed, root, grow, sustain is the one, because we have so many unknowns that are, last I checked, unknown. How are you going to be able to engage?
Unknowns.
Right. And so this cohort that you're putting together, that is coming together organically in your neighborhood, it's more expected in rural areas. Yeah, I saw that in Oklahoma when I was working with Choctaw Nation. It's like you walked in, and I'll tell you, farmers and ranchers, most innovative people I've ever met. Rural people they're being left out of the conversation, and it's completely.
We have to take care of ourselves.
Right. And it was interesting because when I moved back to Austin in 2015 from Oklahoma, I was talking to the guy who's now the mayor, but he was just running for mayor then. And he goes, this is a really great idea what you put together, but it's great for rural areas. We're Austin. And I was like, dude, no, let me explain something.
That's
we're
all a bunch of little neighborhoods.
We're a bunch of little neighborhoods, and it's not about wealth redistribution. It is opportunity redistribution.
I agree.
Give people access to the tools to produce and sustain wealth locally.
Yes.
Not that hard.
It's really not. We just have to, once again, have the will to do it. So I know we're out of time, but I also want to just say another thing that I'm doing, because I have 2 acres that is floodplain. It's constantly flooding. Well, so I'm going to start sporing. The mushrooms grow out there all the time, but I'm going to start putting mushroom spores all over, medicinal and edible mushrooms, and native plants, native edible and medicinal plants to Virginia. I'm going to put them all through, which, by the way, we should all be thinking like that. So Ruth, I just want to say one more thing, and you can answer both at the same time. Okay. So that's why I'm wondering how we help you with what you're doing, because it's so important. So I'll give you both of those.
First of all, I love that you're doing that with the 2 acres. And I have a prototype community plan I can send you for Aquatech.
And bees.
And bees, of course, too, is because the whole point of Aquatech is that this one I put together for some people in San Marcos, they knew it was going to flood. They were at the meeting of 3 rivers. It's going to flood. But there's ways to fix it. Anyway, so that's what I do is I look at problems and say, what is the opportunity here, just as you're doing? So the other is that I'm always looking for new thought forms, new ways to reach people. Because there's people who don't understand the big meta story, right? They're just not in the habit of it. I think everybody has the capacity for it. They're just not in the habit of it.
Okay.
And so I keep bringing it down. So I've written these huge articles. That's too much for people. I've been writing poems. So I have now, as of very early this morning, I've written 285 poems since February 17th.
Wow.
And they are engaging people. It's a way in. That's all I'm always looking for. What is the simple entry point to complexity? Yeah. So the pattern is that we need to look at is what is the simplest entry point we can create so that people don't get overwhelmed, and then trust them to grow into the story.
Oh, well said.
And that's creating that container for them to expand and bring forward more of who they are. And that's circling back to people with disabilities. People dismiss them because, oh, you have a wheelchair, or oh, you have tremors, or whatever it is. And what Keith and I used to say is you just have to realize some people have their wheelchairs on the inside. So when people were saying that I was so brave, I'm like, I knew what I was getting into. You do not. So maybe just say yes to what shows up, and then zoom the bet.
I love that. Great. So Ruth, how can people send me one thing we want to do is we wanted to put those articles you've written, send us the links so that we can put them with the story, but also how do people reach out to you? I know you're on social media, you have a website. Tell the audience how to get a hold of you.
My website is futurestorylab.com. And my address, my link there is for my email, so you can just click there. That's the easiest thing to do. I'm also on Twitter at Guruth. I'm on LinkedIn, and I am on Facebook, of course, too. So there is a number of news stories that are evolving at any given moment. And my real mission is to help people activate their own story, to find their way into that, because we've all been trained to let go of so much of who we are.
Yes.
And we just need a little practice unlearning, and then I think everybody they're off to the races.
I agree. Thank you so much, Ruth. I hope you'll come back on again and keep updating it. I believe your work is very important, and I especially appreciative that you're supporting people with disabilities and Indigenous people as well, but anyone that's being disenfranchised. And of course, our beautiful, precious, living Mother Earth. So thank you so much, Ruth. Thank you so much to the audience. Special thanks to Doug Foresta, the producer that does all the hard work in the background. And we will talk to y'all later. I will definitely bring Ruth back on. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.
You've been listening to Human Potential at Work. To learn more about Ru Global Impact, visit ruglobal.com. And to learn more about Billion Strong, an identity and empowerment organization designed to bring the billions of voices of persons with disabilities together, you can join the global community and donate at billion-strong.org. That's billion-strong.org.